On the final day of the inquiry into historical abuse in Nottinghamshire, we asked what lessons have been learned.
For decades, on the Council's watch, there was almost continuous physical and sexual abuse of children in care.
Good evening. After 3 weeks of evidence, a national inquiry into child sex abuse ended today with passionate calls for change. The hearings in London have been examining how local authorities and police in Nottinghamshire failed to protect children in their care.
Our correspondent Phil Brewster has spent every day following the inquiry and joins us now. Phil, sounds like another emotionally charged day. Tell us what happened.
Indeed, Hannah, but after all the evidence, all the testimony, all the witnesses, today was a chance for all the people and organisations involved in this inquiry to make closing statements to the panel. For some, it was a chance to hold their hand up and say sorry for failing children in their care. For others, it was a chance to condemn the institutions, the systems, the people that allowed this abuse to go unchallenged for so long. And for some, it was a plea to the panel to make recommendations to ensure the abuse never happens again. At times, it was emotional and it was passionate, but no one was left with any doubt about the strength of feeling among survivors that the pain and suffering inflicted on them should never be allowed to happen again.
We would ask that you make it clear that a child in care is never again to be treated as the problem. He or she has the same right to be cared for, looked after, and presumed truthful, regardless of prior circumstances, as any other child.
The Chief Constable reiterates his sincere apology on behalf of Nottinghamshire Police for any case, regardless of how long ago it occurred, where the actions or inactions of the police, or the way in which allegations were handled by the police, in any way exacerbated or prolonged the pain suffered by any complainant.
What of those that are found not to have acted in the best interest of the victims and the survivors? Nothing other than sailing off into the sunset with their gold-plated pensions, while leaving behind the devastation of people's lives.
For decades, on the Council's watch, there was almost continuous physical and sexual abuse of children in care in multiple children's homes across the city and the county, and in multiple foster placements. There was a culture which allowed that to happen, often in plain sight, with council employees and agency workers turning a blind eye.
When children did make disclosures of sexual abuse by their foster carers, far too often they were not believed. There was a flawed approach whereby some social workers adopted the view that if foster carers were experienced or well regarded for the apparent quality of their care, they could not possibly abuse children in their care.
You came to Nottingham a few weeks ago, and I urge you to come back to Nottingham in 18 months to hold the councils and the police and the CPS's feet to the fire once more to see if your recommendations have been implemented and to see if anything has actually been changed. Let them know, Chair, that the sheriffs are coming back to town.
So Phil, this inquiry has lasted 3 weeks. What are the key points that have emerged from it?
Well, Matt, I think there are three main themes. One, the sheer extent of the abuse that took place either in care homes or in foster care. 903 allegations made, 617 suspects named, 22 children's homes currently under investigation. A second, I think, hundreds of missed opportunities by the City and County Council to address the issues that were staring them in the face in reality. And finally, the courage and determination among survivors, not only in telling their stories of horrendous abuse, but also in fighting to make sure that their voices were heard.
15 days of testimony. 15 days to try to uncover why children in care in Nottinghamshire were failed for more than 5 decades. First came the voices of survivors. They remained anonymous, but their testimony was raw and often harrowing.
He did come up to the dormitory in the middle of the night. I woke up with him on top of me, and he got his mouth over my mouth and just says, "I'm not going to hurt you."
The pyjamas had come off. I had nothing in my hands, everything had been put down. Then out of nowhere, he spun me round, put me over that table.
Taken into the cellar, locked away. I mean, brutal beatings. Brutal.
I was told to go and strip naked and stand in the living room, and then all the female members of the foster family were made to sit down and watch while I was physically abused.
The inquiry highlighted untold missed opportunities to stop the abuse. But despite almost 3 decades between them managing Beechwood Children's Home in Mapley, 2 senior bosses claim they'd never seen any sexual or physical abuse during their time in charge.
Did a very good job in the circumstances that they were having to work in.
And do you have any reflection on why it is you didn't come to know?
I haven't, no. I'm shocked.
For one former social services director, the inquiry was a chance to apologise for not preventing the suffering inflicted on children during his watch.
Wholeheartedly can I offer my personal apologies to young people who came into care to be protected, nurtured and helped, and clearly we failed them.
For one current children's services director, it was a chance to justify why her boss wasn't minded to make a public apology until there was good reason.
Making public pronouncements around intensely private things that weren't in the matter, that weren't in the public domain, actually he felt could potentially do more harm than do good.
For some, this inquiry was a chance to finally get some answers. For others, a chance to point the finger of guilt. But for many, it was a chance to be listened to tell their story, and to finally be believed.
I was a victim then, but I'm going to make sure I walk out of here today a survivor, because I've shed enough tears. No, I'm a survivor and I'm leaving a survivor. I'm still breathing, I'm still alive, I'm a survivor.
Phil, some really harrowing accounts there. What happens now?
Well, Hannah, basically now the panel will go away and sift through all that witness evidence, all that testimony heard over the last 3 weeks. They will then go away and compile a report and findings and conclusions based upon what they've heard. That report was expected to be made public sometime next year, probably in early summer. And at that point, we'll find out what the panel really feels about what happened to children in care over more than a 50-year period.
Well, lots of people waiting to hear the results of that report. Thank you very much.
It's almost 6:30. You're watching East Midlands Today.
Tonight, hearings for the Nottinghamshire child sex abuse inquiry end, with calls for a change in the law.
The man who prompted the inquiry receives a formal thank you.
My motto was that I'd rather die fighting than just lay down and surrender.
Good evening and welcome to Friday's programme with Maurice Flynn and me, Sarah Teal.
Good evening. First tonight, the child sex abuse inquiry's spent its final day looking into Nottinghamshire's care system. For 3 weeks now, we've heard harrowing testimony from a string of survivors who've been abused by the very people supposed to be protecting them.
Well, there have been demands for resignations, revelations of systematic failings, and today calls for changes in the law, with the inquiry hearing a series of recommendations. And the man who prompted the whole inquiry today received a formal thank you.
Well, our social affairs correspondent Jeremy Ball has been at every day of the inquiry and joins us now. Good evening, Jeremy.
Yes, Maurice, as you can see, they're already dismantling the inquiry room here, but what they've heard over the last 3 weeks could have far-reaching implications for a very long time to come. And today we heard just how some of the survivors have been profoundly affected. People who've been here, we heard, have been sectioned, have lost their home, have been threatened with having their kids taken off them. Another man we heard killed himself because he simply couldn't cope.
Well, good morning everyone.
The final day of an inquiry that shone a light into the darkest corners of Nottinghamshire's care system. Horrific sexual abuse of children by the people who were supposed to protect them. There throughout a local MP who now wants the lessons to prompt changes in the law.
When kids behaved badly in the past, they ended up getting stuck in institutions, getting raped, violently abused. Countless cases of that because they were seen as the problem. Well, I still think that's going on today with kids being excluded from schools. Therefore, I think this is today's problem.
And today a final witness described how he'd been groomed and sexually exploited by older men. He was around 15 years old, a victim, but he was arrested and then jailed for committing sex offences.
I've been persecuted as an adult. It prevented me from having a family life. I was told that if I pleaded guilty, then I could go home sooner because I wasn't allowed to go home to my parents. until the court case was over because they deemed that I would run away.
The inquiries heard how children at the Beechwood home were sexually abused by their carers over decades. Others were abused by foster parents, but they weren't believed. There was nowhere to turn. The system utterly failed them.
Too often social workers and others failed to pick up on signs that all was not well. When children did make disclosures of sexual abuse by their foster carers, far too often they were not believed. There was a consistent failure to think the unthinkable.
They have been covering it up since 2003!
And for Mickey Summers, praised today, the inquiry heard this angry crusade for justice brought the national inquiry to Nottingham. His lawyer read a powerful statement to the authorities on his behalf.
I do not trust you because on the long drive to Somerset, I was raped by that social worker to whom I had reported the abuse. You came to Nottingham a few weeks ago, and I urge you to come back to Nottingham in 18 months to see if your recommendations have been implemented and to see if anything has actually been changed. Let them know, Chair, that the sheriffs are coming back to town.
So I've had post-traumatic stress disorder meltdowns. I've suffered 2 heart attacks during this campaign. But my motto was that I'd rather die fighting than just lay down and surrender.
This inquiry's only scratched the surface, but the lessons learned could protect a new generation in care nationwide.
Well, absolutely, Jeremy, in 3 very difficult weeks of evidence. So what does happen now?
Well, everything we've heard here will be part of a big report. Today we heard those Nottinghamshire findings are due to be published next summer, and the inquiry team has been asked to make a whole range of recommendations, everything from changing the compensation system to making it much easier for kids in care to report abuse, and a number of calls today for much more money for those hard-pressed social care systems.
And what has been the reaction from the council, Chair?
Well, they say, first of all, that there have been a lot of improvements since the time a lot of this abuse took place. First of all, improvements in training, also much smaller children's homes these days. They do accept, though, that a lot more needs to be done. The County Council this evening has announced it's going to change the way that it handles compensation claims. Today, the City Council said that it needs to look at everything from counselling services to the way it keeps records. And this is all a response, really, to what victims' barristers today described as systematic failings that were bordering on the criminal.
Jeremy, in London for us, thank you very much.
Dennis Healy. World events do not occur by accident. They are made to happen, whether it is to do with national issues or commerce, and most of them are staged and managed by those who hold the purse strings.